Earlier today on Capitol Hill, Congressman Jim Jordan's Weaponization of Government Subcommittee had a very important hearing about censorship. And they brought in presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to talk about how he has been censored by social media outlets like YouTube and Facebook. So the Democrats on that committee, on this hearing about censorship and the weaponization of government, what did they do right at the beginning of the hearing? They moved to censor Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I can't make this up, guys. Here is the member of Congress from the Virgin Islands, Representative Stacey Plaskett.
Now, many of my Republican colleagues across the dais will rush to cover that they have Mr. Kennedy here because they want to protect his free speech, that they do not believe in American censorship. This is not the kind of free speech that I know of. The free speech that is protected by the Constitution's First Amendment. But free speech is not an absolute. The Supreme Court has stated that. And others' free speech that is allowed, hateful, abusive rhetoric, does not need to be promoted in the halls of the people's house.
It's really a great look when you're having a hearing about how the government is involved in censoring American citizens, and you've got a presidential candidate up there telling his story, and suddenly the Democrats step up and try to censor him. They went for a vote on it. Take a look at how they voted.
Ms. Wasserman-Schultz.
No to allowing a witness to degrade and demean others
time.
and violate the rules and not have his testimony and degradation and amplified rather than given an executive session.
Ms. Wasserman-Schultz votes no. Mr. Connolly.
No to the Soviet Politburo.
Mr. Connolly votes no. Mr. Garamendi.
No.
Mr. Garamendi votes no. Mr. Allred. Ms. Garcia.
No.
Ms. Garcia votes no. Mr. Goldman.
No to hate speech.
Mr. Goldman votes no.
No to hate speech. No to the Politburo. We don't want you speaking because you're the Wait, it was the Politburo who actually censored people. Well, the Democrats lost, thankfully, because Republicans do have a majority, and RFK, he actually had a moment to speak. And I want you to hear what he had to say, even though I don't agree with everything he has to say. I know it's weird, but free speech is sometimes even speech you don't agree with. Here's Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
If, by your leave, I'd like to just respond briefly to some of the, what I would call defamations that have been just applied to me by the ranking member. I'm happy to talk to you about my opinions on these issues, what you have stated and tried to associate me with through guilt by association is simply inaccurate. Virtually everything, every statement that you just made about me is inaccurate. I have never advised Black Americans not to receive vaccines. At one point you say I'm anti-vax, and that's a bad thing. The other moment you point out that all my children are vax. I'm fully compliant with the vaccine schedule myself, except for COVID. I took flu vaccines for 20 years straight. I have never been anti-vax. I have never told the public avoid vaccination. The only thing I've asked for, and my views are constantly misrepresented so that the truth of what I believe is not, we're not allowed to have a conversation about that with the American people, which I believe vaccines should be tested with the same rigor as other medicines and medications. You tried to associate me a moment ago with the replacement theory, which is racist.
No, I did not say you
Time
had the
belongs to the
replacement
gentleman
theory.
from
I said my colleagues.
Time belongs to the gentleman from
I denounce that theory. It is racist, and I have never endorsed it or had any association with it. Our film on a medical... By the way, Bill Buxton, who is the Black CDC official who ultimately exposed the Tuskegee experiment, tried for years and years to appeal to CDC to stop it for 40 years. Finally, he got relief by walking into my uncle's office in the building next door. He held hearings and ended the experiment. I remember that very well. And to say that I created a film that encourages blacks not to get adequate medical care. Is just completely abhorrent.
Don't misuse my words.
It's the witness's time. Do not censor the witness.
I'm not censoring the witness. I'm not censoring the witness. He's still talking.
It's my time, and I've given it to the witness. Do not censor him.
I'm not censoring him.
If the views that you and others have applied to me, I've attributed to me, if they were actually true, I can see why I shouldn't be able to testify here today. Those are not true. These are defamations and malignancies that are used to censor me, to prevent people from listening to the actual things that I'm saying. And I think, ranking member, that we should have a real conversation rather than an exchange of ad hominem attacks. And answer very quickly to your question, the term malinformation was coined to describe information that Facebook and Twitter and the other social media sites understood was true, but that the White House and other federal agencies wanted censored anyway for political reasons because it challenged official orthodoxies. I'll give you one example. I was included in a group called the Disinformation Dozen. And Facebook and others were asked to censor us, which they did. And by the way, my Heck Aaron post, it was taken down. My whole Instagram account with 900,000 people was taken down because of that. Oh, they knew, Facebook knew that the Disinformation Dozen claim, and what they said, the Disinformation Dozen came from this very shady group called the Center for Preventing Digital Hate in England that's funded by dark money that should be looked into. They claim that 65% of the vaccine misinformation on the internet was generated by those 12 people. Facebook itself said that is impossible. That is false information. We know that not to be true. And yet, when the White House asked them to censor this Disinformation Dozen, including me, they did it anyway when they knew it to be untrue.
Democrats wanted his voice silenced today on Capitol Hill. Now, I know what you're saying to yourself. It's like, well, he's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's rich, he's famous, he's running for president. So they delete his Instagram and YouTube. He can go on TV anytime he wants. I mean, look at him. He's being able to speak for himself right there in Congress, right? So, you know, no harm, no foul. Well, actually, it's a huge harm and a huge foul. First of all, obviously, nobody should be silenced, whether you're a rich, famous guy like him or just an ordinary person like you or me. But secondly, that's the whole point there. If they can do it to him, easily they can do it to us. And they do it to us. And we don't have a way to fight back. Democrats also don't want this story out, first of all, because they like controlling speech that they don't like. But secondly, the last thing they want is for the American people to see Robert F. Kennedy Jr. behave the way he just behaved, speaking off the top of his head without any notes, vociferously and eloquently defending himself. He's running against Joe Biden right now. This is why they don't want him to be able to get on a debate stage. But there was another part of today's censorship hearing that was very important. It involves former New York Post writer Emma Jo Morris, who covered the Hunter Biden story. Watch this.
On October 19th, 5 days after the Post began publishing, Politico ran a story headlined, "Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo, dozens of former intel officials say." God, I can't even say that with a straight face, you know? Politico printed a letter completely uncritically from veteran members of the U.S. intelligence community, falsely claiming that the Post expose has, quote, all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. My God.
Good for her for laughing about it a few years later, because you do have to laugh at the audacity of this. But then she made a very important point here about the origins of that letter from people in the Intelligence Committee saying that this is Russian disinformation, and about how it was then censored, not just from high-tech social media companies, but from major media outlets, television outlets, cable news stations, broadcast networks. This is critically important. Listen to every word.
No one denies that the laptop is real, that the origin story is exactly what I told you it was in the first place. This elaborate censorship conspiracy wasn't because the information being reported on was false. It was because it was true, and it was a threat to the power centers in this country.
That's right. When they try to censor us, when they try to censor the New York Post and stories that they don't agree with, they don't do it because the information is dangerous and wrong and misinformation or untrue. They do it because it's true and it harms them. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight.